Well, it's been 3 years since we filmed The Year of the Working Sheepdog, and perhaps a good time to give an update on Borough Farm and its dogs. It's been an eventful few years, and not always for the right reasons, but thankfully Borough Farm and its flock survived the foot and mouth year unscathed. A change for the dogs has been a complete new set of kennels, with sofas and armchairs. They seem quite pleased with their new quarters, Ernie in particular. Greg for so long has been my constant companion, and he's now nearly 10. If a true comparison is 7 dog years to 1 human year, then he's now in his late 60s, and quite rightly taking things a little easier. He's still as keen as ever to join the daily work, but now he hangs to the back and lets the youngsters take the strain. In the afternoon he takes rather longer naps than he used to. Swift's now 7, and she hasn't really slowed down at all. Her appetite for work's undiminished, and really she's my top dog now. I rely on her all the time. Perhaps the saddest aspect of the last couple of years for me has been breaking up the working partnership between Greg and Swift. It's Gail who's taken over the other half of the brace partnership. With Greg now in semi-retirement, his partnership with Swift has been broken, even if their friendship's still intact. It's touching that it's still Greg that Swift wants to come to work with, and in the morning she'll stand at the kennel barking for him to be let out. When working with Greg, the 2 dogs had their own sides, Greg on the left and Swift on the right. And whatever the situation, they'd always maintain those sides. Greg was always the brains of the partnership, and he'd always compensate for any wayward movements of the sheep. It's taken a long time for Swift to accept Gail as her new working partner. And in the first place, she obviously didn't trust her to take care of her side of the work. Training 2 dogs to work together can be pretty lengthy. Not only does each dog have to understand its own set of commands, the sheepdog's intelligence will soon allow it to understand its partner's commands, and the temptation to join in can be almost unbearable. Learning to keep to her own side wasn't too much of a problem for Gail. Swift for years had worked with Greg, keeping to the right-hand side all the time. And when working with Gail, that left the left-hand side available, and Gail soon picked up that this was the side she had to work. It's taken over a year to get the 2 of them working together like this. But for me, the hours and hours of training involved are more than rewarded when I work them out on the open ground at Mort Point and see them working together really well at distances like this. Fern's development hasn't been straightforward. As a youngster, her great style and speed of movement made her stand out to me as a dog of huge potential. She took her whistle commands easily. With those great big prick ears, her hearing was undoubtedly better than most of the other dogs. My hopes were high that as well as being an excellent working dog at home, she'd also be able to compete really well on the trials field. Unfortunately, there was a problem. Fern's always had a slightly sensitive side to her nature, Most obvious when I try and put her back in her kennel. And this began to show itself at work. If she was unsure of herself in any way, or unsure of what she was being asked to do, she'd either look for sanctuary in the Land Rover or perhaps on the motorbike, and sometimes she'd even put in a refusal to work at all. In short, the everyday jobs were fine, but if I ever asked her to do something a little bit unusual or something she was unsure of, she might just lay there and refuse to move at all. The problem, I was convinced, was only confidence. You can't really train for confidence, so all I could do was give her plenty of work and reassurance and ask her to do the jobs that she was sure of. But it's still a bit frustrating when you have a dog that you can move 2 paces to the left at half a mile, but you can't even call 10 yards back to you to put in the kennel. In any group of dogs, there's a well-defined hierarchy. In my pack, it's best seen when they're away from work, perhaps running up the drive in front of the quad bike. Each member of the pack will focus on the dog it considers to be its immediate superior, and when at play, this is how they line up. Greg has been the top dog all his adult life, and he'll always look to me as his boss. Second in command is Swift, and she'll always turn her attention to Greg. And Fern, who plays with only Swift, and lastly Ernie sees Fern as his superior. Strangely, Gale's the only dog I've ever had that plays no part in this hierarchy. And then there's Ernie. He won my heart at an early age, and I can't really explain why. In the first place, it was his complete single-minded obsession with sheep, as well as an amazing natural ability. I can't pretend his training's been easy. In fact, it's been far from it. It has been all along and still is hard work. Balance is a term used to describe the dog's desire to hold or balance sheep to the shepherd without allowing them to escape. For Ernie, this instinct's so strong he finds it almost impossible to resist, which in turn makes driving sheep away from me rather difficult for him to master. Commanding him by voice or whistle is often a battle, just to stop him doing what he's determined to do. When I blow a stop command, I often have to blow it 5 times, and claim to myself that the first 4 were only warm-ups. He's hugely athletic. It never crosses his mind that he can't clear exactly what's in front of him.
Come by.
And where a flock of sheep are concerned, if he can't go over them, he can always go underneath. Sheepdog's work is a mixture between times when they've got to run flat out, as well as those jobs requiring concentration and subtlety. Ernie possesses the attributes to perform all these tasks. It's just a case of persuading him to perform them when I want him to. But his desire to work's endless, and he's fast becoming my first choice dog when I go to the kennel. Around the farm, Ernie shows a huge devotion to me, which is quite the opposite to what you might expect from a dog who's so obsessed by his sheep work. It's curious how Ernie seems unconcerned about his place at the bottom of the hierarchy, but I'm convinced somewhere in that broad head of his, he's got his path mapped out to one day becoming top dog. It'd be nice to think that one day Fern and Ernie could work together as a brace. And there are just occasions when it looks like it might be possible. But in truth, I don't think Ernie's ever going to be a team player. As last winter passed, I began to think that Fern was perhaps overcoming her problems of confidence. There's no particular cure, just time and allowing her to perform more and more tasks that she felt confident of doing. And at last, the ability that I always believed she'd had is showing through. And recently she won her first sheepdog trial. The sheep farming side of things might carry on with little change, but the children are a different matter. It only seems 5 minutes since Nick was rolling about on the floor with Ernie when he was a pup. Claire's got a new pony. Laura's busy looking after some ducks that she's just hatched out. The satisfaction I get from working with sheep and sheepdogs and bringing up a young family in the beauty of the North Devon countryside remains undiminished, as after all, it's not a bad way to make a living.